See if we got it. Willie, can you hear me?
Got thumbs up.
Got it.
So, hey, you made it past security. Good morning, folks. Hi. Thank you for coming. I have to stand over because we're sharing the microphone. How's that? Perfect. We'll cover some housekeeping things in a couple minutes here, but before we do that, I'd like to introduce my boss, Brian Matthews, Dr. Brian Matthews, who's been here for 20?
You're that old.
I thought you were 39.
I am.
Right. So he's been here for 20 years, came over from the Naval Academy. Before that, he was here. The thing about Brian, I think, sets him aside from some athletic directors is he knows rowing. I would bet that a bunch of you have ADs, the ones that have programs within schools that you have athletic directors that don't know rowing, and it's a constant thing of teaching. Well, Brian's been great about learning, and it's taken me 20 years to train him, and he's just finally figuring out the difference between an erg and a pin, but we're getting there with him. So I'm going to introduce him and sit down and let him do his thing for a minute.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Good morning. First thing I have to say, I saw it driving in 209. Really? Who has a better memory than me? Because I've asked this. When's the last time gasoline was $2.09 a gallon? Somebody. How many? 5. I don't know. I would have guessed a lot longer than that. I don't know. But I'm loving it. 209. It's amazing. Fortunately, an unevent storm day today, but I do want you to know that within a 20-mile radius of us sitting here right now, there are a whole lot of people that are so excited because this is a perfect goose hunting morning. So for those of us that are skiers, this is a powder day for them. That's what they're doing out there. So that's going on around us as we sit here. Really, I just want to thank you for coming here this morning for 2 reasons. The first reason is because Mike and Allison and a whole lot of people, as you can see, put a lot of work into this event, and they want it to be as valuable for you as possible. And that can only happen if you'll take your day to come to grad school for a day, which is what you're all doing here today. The second reason that I want to thank you for coming, though, is because I'm in the business of coaches, and this is a bunch of coaches who are willing to be students of the game for a day and work at your profession and getting better. And I think that's incredibly important and valuable out there. I'm going to bet that most of you don't spend enough time thinking about what a tremendous impact you have on people out there. Most coaches don't. We get so wrapped up in doing all the million things you do, but to really think for a little bit about how much of a difference you make. You really are human development specialists. You are influencers. You are persuaders. You are confidence coaches. You are life coaches. You just happen to use rowing as your method of doing it. And I think we don't spend enough time in this business stepping back for a second and realizing the wonderful impact that has. What I think is really neat about this, and I've liked this setup from the beginning, is I think Mike and his people, the way they do it, keeping it short, moving through it, but I also really like the way that it's such a mixture. I mean, I went to lacrosse coaches conventions for 20 years, and they weren't as smart as this. I didn't think. Is the way this is really about mind, body, and spirit all day long. And Mike and I don't spend much time talking about how to make a boat go faster, because he knows when you're talking to an old, thick lacrosse coach, the eyes glaze over when you're trying to tell me how you make the little rockets go faster looking backwards down the river there. What is really interesting to me, fascinating, is the part that's between the ears. And today I know you'll have some time to be thinking about that as well. My encouragement would be that you're gonna take a lot of notes on the skill sets and the strategies of how to make a boat go faster, but I really hope we all take the time to think about how we influence and persuade what's between the ears. I just want to tell you a quick story because I was thinking of it coming in about this, and to me it's the most fascinating part about coaching, but the hardest part is what a team does when they compete against somebody who beat them the year before, and especially who just beat them at the end. Is 2 years ago, our men's lacrosse team here is pretty good. 2 years ago, in the quarterfinals of the NCAAs, we played Stevenson at Stevenson. They were ranked much higher than us, probably a better team than us. They were certainly the favorite. Close game, 1-goal game the whole way till the fourth quarter. They beat us in the fourth quarter, fair and square. Beat us, outplayed us in the fourth quarter. This year, we went back, or this past year, went back, played them again in the semifinals of the NCAA National Championships. And I stood there and watched a team with a completely different approach, attitude, confidence, will, whatever we want to call it, belief. 1-goal game, whole game, great game, 2 teams back and forth. Fourth quarter, we beat them, flat out beat them, fair and square. Came away, and as you were watching that, there was no way our team believed that the same thing was going to happen again. And if we could all bottle that, and if any coach could figure out how to have their team compete with that will, that confidence, that belief, energy, all the things we want to list under there, you'll be good. You'll be real good. Anybody that can do that. And to me, it's the most fascinating part about coaching, the hardest part. But I think you're gonna spend some time talking about that part of it today too, which to me is really neat. The one thing I'd like to ask you to do today is to allow yourself a little bit of time to soak in Washington College while you're here. There's lots of great colleges out there, and this is a wonderful little piece of higher education here, settled in paradise on the Eastern Shore. So, and it does wonderful things for the kids that are here for 4 years, the way they develop, what they come out. We're not the only ones that do it, but while you're here, since you're here today, I'd ask you to just take a little bit of time to soak it in and get a feel for it, because you're probably going to have some kids that are looking for this type of a college, so have them look here too and take a look at this one. So I hope you will. I hope you have a great day. I know it's going to be good business for you. Good piece of grad school, a lot of learning going on, a lot of conversations, so that's pretty neat. So thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Still good, Willie? My sister-in-law works on live TV, and she says what you see on TV is nothing like what really happens on the set. So a lot of times there's the trading of the microphone, there's the tucking into the shirt, there's the screaming, the person that put up the wrong graphic behind them, and they just happened to get that off before it came on the screen. So there's a lot of little rough spots, and what we're going to have is a little bit of rough spot here is when we introduce speakers, we're going to have to change this little microphone. This microphone is not for this room. This room is great, but guys can hear me fine. Right? This is for the live streaming. And that brings up one of the things I want to talk to you about is a couple little housekeeping things. First off, I'm Mike Davenport, and I've been here for 25 years, so I've been here 5 years longer than Brian. I continually tell him that. One of the reasons I came here is because I really like the environment, and I really like coaching at this level. And I really like the people I work with. I think that's really critical. And I'm going to ask you, as we are in here or you're out in the hall or we go to lunch, is look around in the room with all these other coaches. We're going to present information to you. Some of the information, we being the speakers, may not be new. It may be a little bit that's new. That's going to be important, especially reviewing of information. But what's more important are the people that are in this room, the connections. And over the year, this is our 6th year. This is our farewell event. And over the 6 years, I've had numerous emails come in and people say, oh, I made this connection at Rowing Talks #2 or 2012, and this helped me do this. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'd like you to walk away from is the other people in this room, making connection. People that you can look around right now and say, I've never seen that person before in my life. Person's wearing a Seahawks fan. This is Patriots country here. No, just kidding. No, all our footballs here are fully inflated, so no worries, right? So look around, make those connections, talk when we go up there to the dining hall and have lunch and mingle, okay? And trade notes as much as you can. Biggest housekeeping thing is the bathrooms are right out the door, off to the left. No drinks or food in here. I think some of you are already frisked by our little TSA guys that are out there. Okay, but this is a real nice room, and they really want to keep it that way, so no drinks or such in here. We have a lot of speakers. We do go 18 minutes, except for the first speaker. This is Dan Rook, and Dan will introduce you in a second, and Dan will come up, and he's 30 minutes. We hold them to the clock. Some speakers love the clock. Some speakers don't. But if you get a little la-la-eyed and it's not the speaker for you, then you just look at the clock and it's ticking down. Okay, the hook comes out. Regardless of who it is, the hook comes out. Right? Okay, so before we get going, in your packet, there are a couple things. The very last, well, I don't know if it's the last thing, but there's a questionnaire in there, a little survey. If you would please be so kind to do that at the end and let it fly. We want to know. We've made a lot of changes over the years because we respond to what people want. This is really informal. You really want to get up and go out. Get up and go out. Okay? If you got a question, and yes, come on up, Allison. Oh, come on up, Allison. Allison doesn't like to come up. Okay. There's been a lot of people that have helped, and this is probably the main person. You may have talked to her on email. You may have talked to her on the phone. She's really going to get mad at me now, and I don't care. This is Allison Murphy, and Allison has a very important thing. What is that important thing, Allison?
If you didn't get a raffle ticket in the back of the name tag, just let me know, because we're going to do a U.S. running raffle, and I want anyone to miss out. So I think the only people that may miss out are the Friday night people who didn't phone up. So just let me know.
Quick show of hands if you don't have a raffle ticket. Everybody's good? Speakers, you can have a raffle ticket too. All right, there you go. There's some up there. So if you want to do that while we go.
Question.
Yes, question.
Why is this the last rowing?
Why is this the farewell event? I've gotten at least a dozen of those. This started as a project 6 years ago, and the project was twofold. One is to increase the exposure of Washington College in the world of rowing. I think we've accomplished that in the high school world of rowing. Help with recruiting and just kind of and to meet people and meet coaches. The second thing is to give back. Coaching is really hard. I've spent 35 years in coaching, or 34 years in coaching, and I've written a lot about it, and I care a lot about the profession. I care a lot about the people in it. And I know it's tough. And we thought, well, we have resources here. Let's see if we can give back. So we kind of came to the point where it was the end of a project, so we're going to morph it into something else. We're not sure. And on that piece of paper, if you say, oh, it'd be really cool if you did this, not if you gave everybody free cheesecake for life. Don't put that down. But if there's something coaching education-wise, let us know. But it was a project, so it's good to go out with a bang. That's fine. Okay. Anything else? Okay, give us 2 minutes. I'll get Dan going here, and then we'll fire up. Come on up, Dan. I'll switch mics. By the way, this is live streamed. You'll see the cameras. So just make sure if you really want to blow your nose, the camera may be on you. You just never know. All right, we've got a bunch of speakers I'm going to introduce today. And I thought, how can I be less boring and less time-consuming with the introductions? So I picked one word for each speaker. I've known Dan since, what was it?
84.
84.
Yeah.
So 84, Dan and I coached a year together at Florida Tech. And I was thinking, talking to my wife, so what's a word to describe Dan? Because my wife also knows Dan. And the one that kept popping up is, to me, Dan's cool. I mean, well, he lives in Vermont now, so I can see the coolness aspect from the temperature. But yeah, it's just, to me, he's just a cool guy. I like hanging out with Dan. Dan's cool. All right. So I'm going to introduce Dan Rook. He's going to tell you about what he does. If you want to know more about Dan, it's in the sheet, or you go up and ask him, say, are you cool? All right, Dan Rook.
Thanks, Mike.
There you go. You can clap him.
Yeah. Okay, the clock is on. I'm kind of excited about the clock because it
brings up a little bit of my competitive nature, and I'm going to race through that, but especially because at the end I have a bunch of videos here, which I think are just helpful, because coaching, it's such a visual thing. You have to see what you're doing, and that's, at least for me, I think I've made my most advances in coaching is when I just watched a lot of really good crews. So I've packed in as many videos as I can, and there's a really good one at the end, and if we don't get to it, that's unfortunate. So here we go. The chat here is all about, in coaching, when is less more or less, because, all right, this is working. In rowing, it's all about the more. Obviously, we want to go faster, so we want to go more fast. And how do you do that? Well, it's always, well, if you're stronger, more power, or more endurance will make you faster. More, the more strength. Strategically, more cadence. If you could row a higher cadence, maybe you'll go faster. And technically, if you row longer, maybe more length, you'll go faster. So it's always just more, and we tend to want to work more and more and more. And but to get to these levels of real top speed with all the mores, sometimes you need to pull back a bit. And in this now 28 and a half minutes, we'll try to cover just some instances of, and we can't do everything, and it's so easy to get carried away with technical things and whatnot. But we're just going to just hit a few things, and away we go. So here we go. First thing I'm going to offer up is a coaching methodology which I employ, which is taking out the trash. So everyone, a good rowing stroke, I think, is one that you have to do what's essential. And what's essential, well, if you imagine this is a blade, you have to put your blade in here. You drive it through the water and you take it out. And when you put it in, hopefully you're ready to put a ton of energy on that blade, and you keep it moving. And that's kind of it. But in rowing, it's a body. The body's moving around. There's always this stuff that you do that you don't really need to do. There's always, almost all technical problems are when, not that the rower's not doing something, but they're doing too much of something. And so you just take out the trash, get rid of all the bad stuff, and what you're left is the good stuff, hopefully. And that's usually what happens in rowing. First off, this idea of taking out the trash, I have to give it credit where credit is due, and that goes to Ed Hewitt, who will be here chatting later today. Ed, what people don't, well, I think everyone knows Ed as the Row 2K guy, and he's done a fantastic job with this Row 2K website. It's stunning how much work goes into that. But I think it's a huge part of our sport is to have this media connection to Row 2K. What I think folks don't know about Ed is how good a rower he was. He represented the U.S. as a sweep rower and as a sculler, as a heavyweight and a lightweight. I think he's been to 5 senior teams. He's never been in any final less than the A final. Like he's every time he's gone out, he's been in the A final. He's got a silver medal. He's got a bronze medal. He's come a couple of 4th places. He's been in the U.S. lightweight 8, the U.S. lightweight quad. He's just really, really, really good. But people don't know that. They think, oh, he's just the guy who runs Row 2K. He's also a really, really, really good coach. So that's where I got this from. I was in a conversation with Ed. He was down at Princeton, where the national team was training, and that's where Ed lives. I was down there visiting. I coached for a while, but this time I was just down visiting. And Ed popped down to the boathouse, and I was there and said, hey, Ed, how's it going? What are you doing? And so I'm here to take out the trash. And I thought Princeton, of all places, probably have people that can do that. What are you doing here? But what he was referring to, he was volunteering with the national team, and there was a group of athletes there who hadn't made any boats yet, and so they were kind of the dregs of the national team program. But he was down there to coach those guys, so he was kind of joking around. Said, "Oh, I'm going to go down and take out the trash." He's taking out the guys that nobody else wants to take out, and coach them a little bit. But he extended that into what I've used this for. Is he was going out with these guys because they had problems. They usually, again, they did more than they needed to do, and he was just going to help get rid of that trash out of their rowing. And so I just want to give our first little video here, an example of one bit of trash rowing that bothers me probably the most, and that's just front end. Some people call it a lunge, some people call it overreach, or whatever else. But we're going to watch here. This is Elizabeth Sunshine. She's a rower up at Craftsbury where I coach. She from Bates College. She's been there. This is a video of her in her first year, just learning how to scull. So she's a pretty good sweep rower. and she has potential there at Bates, and so now she's trying to learn how to scull. But what she does in this first little clip of the video is she'll come up and she'll lunge. Boom. So what that is, she gets up to the front end all the time, and instead of keeping her seat and hands sort of coordinated, so as the seat's going this way, her hand's going that way, and instead of making the catch this simple little, that's all you got to do with the catch is just take the weight off the top of the oar handle. That's all you have to do if you're in the right place. Instead of just being able to do that, her whole body's moving around. So if it's like the one athletic move in rowing is the catch, really. And all it is this. But people, if you get up there and you're lunging, to have this hand just move up like that, it's easy if the body's stable. Anyone can go up and go, oh, there's a catch. And that's really all it is. But if the rest of your body, the other end of your arm is moving at the same time, then that sort of easy athletic move becomes a crazy one. Because how can you locate the catch if this is moving? You get up there and it's like trying to write your name. It's easy to write your name, but try to write your name and move your shoulder like that. It just doesn't happen that well. So whatever, poor Elizabeth here is rowing along. She gets to the front end and she lunges. And it's not huge. It's not like a big swing. She gets up there and she just gets this little bounce. So let's watch poor Elizabeth. At any rate, half of this is her. Oh, sorry. It's this thing. This is one of those glitches Mike talked about. Boom. All right, so she's going along. She's only been sculling for a couple months, but she gets to the front. She doesn't have enough body angle, so she's got trash. There's trash up there at the front, and the trash is, she does this. It's not huge, but she gets up there and she reaches right at the end of up at the front end. She tries to get more. And what happens then, she loses all her stability, her hands go down, her blades go in the air, she misses water, all these things which are just bad, bad, bad. If she only took out the trash, if she only got rid of that lunge at the front, she'd be fine. So the second half of this, so this is the too much part. The second half of this, she's actually be wearing the same clothes, I think. But it'll be 2 years later. You'll see she'll go around and she'll get good body prep. And she won't lunge anymore. And she gets this stable boat. And she gets great catches. And the boat just goes way better. Because she took out the trash. She did something less than what she's doing here. And ended up being way more. So in a moment, it'll look like she just changes direction, but really she adds 2 years. Here she goes, 2 years later. Maybe it's the same shirt, she's wearing long trousers. But it's just better. I mean, she's still got a ways to go. It's not perfect. But notice now she sets her body, and she comes up, and it doesn't move. So she can get up to the front end and place her blade. And it's, again, she's still got a ways to go, but it's just way, way better. Because she got rid of this extra motion. And she's doing okay. Like, she's been in the top 10 at the head of the Charles the last couple of years. She's been like top 3 or 4 at the fall speed order. So she's getting there. And again, what this also shows is persistence. This is like 2 years later. So at first she'd lunge all the time. She had to identify what the problem was. And it took her 2 years, but now she's okay. Ask Craftsbury in the fall. Nice, challenging water to row on. It's leaves are gone, which the leaves are gone for more of the year than they're actually in the trees. So again, she's just getting better. But there you go. She took out something, took out the trash. And this will finish up in just a moment. Again, and still room, obviously, things to go. But there she goes. She'll be scooting along. Next up, we'll let you finish this out as I start talking the next thing. What is more or less, too, is when you're dealing with an individual workout. Well, a very classic workout in rowing is like 5 times 5 minutes. Or sometimes 5 minutes you can do 1,500 meter pieces, either on the erg or in the boat. It's a very, very classic workout. And I used to do it a lot, too, because everyone else does it. So why not? Just do 5 times 5 minutes. But if you send out any crews to do a 5 times 5 minute piece, what will happen is that everyone will get going, and the first piece will come along, and they'll start cranking. And all right, see Elizabeth. So there you go, 5 times 15 minutes, 5 times 5 minutes. What happens then? The crews will get going, and almost everyone will crank out a really good first piece. And there's not a problem with that because on race day, what's the race? Well, the race is the first piece. So if you got people who can really get after it on the first piece, that's fine because that's race day. But the problem is, okay, the second piece, what would happen then? Well, it'd suck because everyone's sort of tired still from the first piece because they went hard. But again, don't complain about that. But Then the third piece is usually a little better because they've recovered some from the second piece, but it's not as good as the first piece. And the time we get to the fourth piece, then they're starting to get tired again. This fifth piece usually goes a little bit better because it's the last piece, and everyone always throws out a little bit more in the last piece. So I do like a 5 times 1,500 meter piece, or a workout, or 5 times 5 minutes. In reality, you've had one good piece. So you think you're doing all this work, but like the real quality was only in one piece. So I had this problem. This is when I was coaching at Cornell. I thought, okay, how can we make this workout more effective? The one trick was, and I'm sort of proud of myself for coming up with this, was instead of recording like who or ranking the athletes based upon who had the best piece or who had the best average for those pieces, I decided, okay, the winner of the day, or you're going to be ranked by how good your worst piece was. And I have a hard time saying all that, but it was looking for the best worst person rather than the best. And that sort of fits along a little bit with racing. So oftentimes crews that win, obviously it goes the fastest crew won, but sometimes fastest over 2,000 meters isn't the crew that had at any one point in that race the fastest boat speed, but it's the crew that had the least slowest boat speed, or the ones that could sustain at a higher level. So I thought, well, gee, that's pretty clever of me. We're going to do this workout, and the idea is, again, I don't care how, what the top score was. I wanted to be sure that your worst piece was really good. So that was a whole different sort of paradigm for these folks as they do this workout. So I thought, okay, we're about ready to do it. I thought, well, it's so new. I'm going to reduce the workout to 3 times 1,500 meters instead, just because it was new. And the goal is to do this for 5 pieces because that just seems to be the right amount of work to do. But before we got there, we'll just do this one day. We'll just do 3 pieces, and we'll just see how it goes, just to give them a chance to figure out how to go about it. So we did, and sure enough, as you might expect, some people didn't go hard enough, and they ended up, trying to have a good first piece, and they kind of cut back too far, and they could easily match it in the other pieces. Most everyone still went hard on the first piece and couldn't match the other pieces, so they kind of blew up. So a week goes by, you're going to do the same thing again. Think, okay, we'll go do 5 pieces because I want to do 5 pieces because everyone does 5 pieces, and it must be something special about 5 pieces. But at the last moment, say, now let's just do 3 pieces again because that's what they did last week. See if the athletes can see any improvement from that previous week. So anyway, we did 3 times 1,500 meters pieces, and sure enough, everyone did way better. I think a lot of it is just because they knew the workout, and they knew then not to go too hard if they went too hard on the first piece, or to go harder if they were too soft. But everybody across the board did better. A week later, this is Cornell, so we have many, many weeks of erg rowing before we can row again. So 3rd week out, same deal. It was okay, 5 times 5 minutes, and I changed my mind again. We did 3 minutes again, and sure enough, everyone did better. And so I thought, well, gee, something's going on here. So the 4th week, 3 times, we just kept it at 3, and every single week for 8 weeks in a row, everyone got better. And I thought, well, gee whiz, why did people bother doing 5 pieces? If the goal of a workout and training is to improve, and which they did, remarkably so, I hit on something. Now, I can't say that you should always just do 3 pieces now, but there was something there. There was enough to look at or kind of experiment and try something different. And lo and behold, boom, it worked. So maybe, I don't know why people always do 5, but now we do 3, and we're just fine. Okay, we have video teasers throughout this whole talk. This is one here. Ready? Let me get this to go. And I'll just explain what you're looking at as we go. But the guy to look at is Malcolm Baker. So Malcolm Baker is this guy. This is from long ago. This is 1992. This is the U.S. Olympic men's 8 training down at Princeton. I use Malcolm Baker ever since 1992 as a guy who's almost trashless. Like his rowing style has very little trash. He's horizontal. He's just got leg drive, the body connection. He's well prepared. Watch his outboard arm moving back and forth, and just how is the handle play, like where his handle's going. It's awesome. The guy behind him is a hammer, and the guy in front of him is kind of a hammer. And it's subtle, the difference, but again, I just keep bringing Malcolm out. Right now, he's actually a professor of finance at the Harvard Business School, so he's a pretty smart guy. But the guys on either side of him have a little trash. And what's that trash? They lift up off the front. Instead of just pushing their legs, they get a lot of body. Malcolm connects. He pushes and he connects the power to the handle. The guy behind him, when you watch him, he ends up in his lap at the end of every stroke. You'll see him a little later in the clip. Because he gets to the front end. Again, these are Olympians, so this is not bad rowing. And they're powerful, super powerful. But there's still a difference. The guy behind him will get up there, he kind of drops his shoulder a bit, and he begins his stroke, but his big body, boom, up. And that stalls the continuity of his power. And he ends up in his lap. Where Malcolm here, he's just really, really, really good. And he's just his leg drive, body acceleration. But the reason it's so good, there's nothing in there that's trashy. Like there's nothing is getting in the way. You know, you just watch his outboard shoulder. He has a little bit of a shoulder roll right before the front, but it's horizontal. He's not dipping down. And this guy, this poor guy, you watch him at the front because he's got like the sunshine bounce up and down. His body bounces at the front. And that triggers all sorts of stuff that we can't go into in a half an hour, but he ends up in his lap. He drives up back here and he ends up pulling into his lap. So there you go. We got more video teasers to come. We'll move on. Again, rowing is about watching things, and it's just really, really critical. All right, another thing, I think where less is more often is truly understanding what training is. I think everybody does, but it's nice to bring this up. But also, this PowerPoint stuff, it gives me a chance to go into their pile of little images and can pull up cool things. But training, good training, I think everyone's aware it's work and it's rest. And the less is more part in here is I think people are always really good on the work part, and work just making, straining the body or putting stresses on, and everyone falls short on the rest part. So less rest is not more rest is more, but when you look at the totality of training, the ratio there between work to rest, I think people could stand to use more rest. As a quick example of this, John Graves is one of the athletes at Craftsbury, and he's one of the best scullers in the country, and he's not that big a guy, he's a little guy. But just this past week, his performance started to go down and down and down. And he knows because he's really good at training. He's a fantastic athlete, and he knows his body super duper well. But he recognized that his heart rate was a little bit wasn't going high enough on some pieces, though he wasn't able to generate that sort of energy. His power outputs were sort of down, and everything was down. And he started to really worry that maybe he was getting sick. He's out cross-country skiing in the cold, and maybe the cold air was upsetting his lungs somehow. We're trying to figure out, okay, what's wrong with John? And he's one of the toughest guys around. And so he was just all wrapped up in it. But what it was is just the week before, we had introduced one new workout. And that was an intense, short interval, very intense. And he didn't really account for that workout in his total training scheme. Like he just added it to everything else we were doing. And it just triggered just that level that he started to accumulate fatigue. Or he didn't recover from that, and he added on all these other workouts. And here's an elite athlete he's been on the national team a number of years. He's just good. But suddenly he wasn't good. And he started worrying all about it. So we discovered that, it was hard for him to take the suggestion, but I told him to just take a couple of days off. And he did, and he didn't want to, but then suddenly he came back, and then this week he's better than he ever was. And it's even at the elite level, it's easy to not allow enough rest because there's so much happens, I feel bad for especially programs that you have to row in the mornings because it puts such a stress on the need for these athletes to allow enough rest. And you need long sleep, especially youngsters so much of the neurological development and everything else happens when you get a lot of rest. If you don't get enough rest, obviously you run out of fuel. I love these little gizmos. So there's another one. And we want to avoid that. We don't want to run out of fuel. I want to keep going. So again, we can talk about 3 hours about, okay, what's the right balance between rest and training? We don't have that, but have the courage to maybe do a little, be sure that in your plan there's enough time for people to recover, and you'll be fine. Okay, here's another video teaser. These guys, this is probably the most trash less crew I've ever seen. And it's old, yeah, this is the mid-80s. These are the Italian lightweights, Italian lightweight 8 rowing. This is awesome, rowing in San Moritz for a high altitude camp. This beautiful alpine water. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, it's a wooden boat. They're old Macon blades. It's a bow cock stayed. It's crazy. But what is happening is these guys, this is one of the best boats I've ever seen. That's why I still show it all the time, as far as being slick. No extra motion, very horizontal. Blades, the blades just come in. The entries are so fast, but they're not working on being fast. They're just being prepared, and away they go. So let's watch this. Someone used to talk about this stuff as being sort of rowing porn. I don't know, that's sort of a little offensive, but but man, I just love watching this stuff. So these guys, again, mid 80s or late 80s Italian lightweights, it's just such a simple stroke. There's no lunging. They get really well prepared. They're just so relaxed and just follow like the handle and arm path. Like their arms, are they, breaking and twisting and everything? No, and their blades in and out. It's just, the quality is not the greatest, but the video. But they're in this long, steady state, and after a while, they'll even barely bother to feather the blade because it's just, you don't need to. It's trash if you don't really have to. So, whatever. This is one of the videos that I just pull out and look at when I just sort of want to get my eye back straight again, and just how good is really good. And these guys were just stunningly good. This is one of those boats that went way faster, or just abnormally fast, just amazing. So, just, you got to watch rowing to get really good at seeing how it goes. In a moment, they'll pan back and you'll see the boat in its entirety as it moves. But it's just simple stuff. There's no lunge, the handle path. There's no excessive ups and downs. There's just this nice fluid motion forward. And again, and the good thing is that I've never seen a boat that's been perfect. Like everyone's individual has little things that go on, but it's really slick stuff. Old Italian lightweights. Yeah, and you might think, well, what are we going to learn from a boat that's, wooden oars old oars and whatnot. Rowing really is rowing. Rowing hasn't changed. The equipment does change, but the physics doesn't. The human body doesn't. I mean, just the connection to the water and what makes the boat go fast has been the same forever and ever. And that's, I think, one of the beauties of the sport. It really doesn't change. Training, it varies. People learn more about this or that. So watch this. This is, I think, the cool thing. Just the blades just kind of float over the water, and then they're gone. And boom, they're just gone. Then you watch the bodies. The bodies doing anything? No, they're prepared, and there's no big doop in the boat. The hands just go up and doop. They're just prepared, and they unweight the handle, and the blade's in, and then they drive their legs. So you just take the weight off the handle, drive your legs. Take the weight off the handle, drive your legs. Do it enough, it gets really slick. All right, 6 minutes. I think we might get to John. Whoops. Oh, my goodness, what happened? Uh-oh. Is it going to take more time? Okay, there it is. Where's that little thing? I hope so. Get back to it. Okay. Oh, no. I don't get extra time for this, though, do I? You seen that? Oh, there it goes again. Oh, my goodness. I'm trying. Okay, get it back. So what's going to show up here is it's going to be a picture of a hammer. That's what that's about, and it's going to talk about toughness. And toughness is something that's so central to our sport that, okay, almost. How about, what is the next one? There it is. Awesome, perfect. So toughness is, so you never want less toughness. I mean, toughness is one of the things you want more of, as much as you possibly can. So Why does this fit in here? I think as coaches, it's wise to sort of strategize your toughness in a way, or you're going to have really tough athletes on your team, and some that won't be so much. But the deal is sort of cherish that toughness and be sure that it's directed towards when you need it the most, and that's in racing situations, hard training situations, and that I've just seen with the hammer there that if you come along and you just hammer your crews every day, you do something you really ask them to be tough, like all the time, the tough guys are going to wear out and they fatigue, and then all of a sudden you'll start to confuse, or the real danger is you confuse this fatigue for not being tough. And I've just seen that happen so much. It's just this it's almost tragedy. So it goes back to the less is more in your training. Be sure that, if you go out and, there are times in training where you got to work hard. You just always have to work hard, but you do it, day after day after day. But then you have to recognize when your people need sort of recovery time again. And toughness is part of that. The deal is your toughest people are always going to do what you ask, and they're going to go hard, and they're going to wear out. And if they, you don't want that. You don't want to. It's such a almost like a blessing to have tough people. You want to ask them to be tough when it really matters, and they will. And so that's what that is. And that's just one of these sort of sense of coaching. You got to sense your team and whatever else. I had a coach in Mike Tatey a long time. I was down at Princeton. I was coaching women there, and he was coaching the heavyweight men. And he had this reputation of just being this rock hard, tough guy coach. But what people didn't really appreciate is how clever he was in allocating that tough, or the workouts and the times and the pieces when he asked for toughness, and the other times, when we're doing technical work or whatever else, there's stuff that need required focus, but he doled out the toughness requirements just very cleverly, especially for these freshmen, and they responded, and they just whatever. If you keep beating people up, keep hammering on them, they may not work. Okay, here we go. It's not quite 9:30 yet. I've got a few minutes, so we have a chance to watch. This is John Graves. He's the guy who didn't account for the extra workout in his training, and just a little bit more rowing, just some Craftsbury rowing, and this should finish up, so it should be done within seconds of the end of the clock. I'm surprised it worked out that way, but here we go. Anyway, so this is John Graves. I just have him in here because this is pretty good rowing. It's pretty trashless rowing. It's nothing's ever totally perfect, but he's just doing a little steady state row here. He's such a good athlete that you might, if you're really clever, you notice like his leg drive, sometimes it's direct and it's just continuous, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes he adjusts, so he's always feeling the water, but he's feeling it and he's adjusting his connection through the pace of his legs. And again, this guy's spent a lot of time in the boat. He was 3-seat in the U.S. quad this past year. He rode in the bow seat of the grade 8 that was in Boston, that won the head of the Charles. And he's not that big. He's 6 feet tall, weighs 180 pounds, but he's just really fast. And what you may not get fully appreciate here is this is steady state row, just how fast his boat's moving through the water. He's just a really good, versatile sculler. And he also can drain three-point shots. Again, he was a All-American soccer player at Trinity when he was in college. So athleticism can play out in our sport in a good way. But I just like watching him row. Thankfully, I get to watch him row every day. And just a little bit of, everyone who's here comes from somewhere. So I'm just a little bit of a blurb for Craftsbury there, see how nice the water is and the green trees. And it's, but John he's just really skilled. He's not totally trashless. Like if you look at his shoulder there on the right, as you look here, it wiggles around quite a bit. And that, he grew up with 2 older brothers, and they're playing football, and he separated his shoulder as a kid, and someone else jumped on him at the same time. So his shoulders got a different arrangement of cartilage and things than most people's. So that's just like at first I think of that as a flaw, try to get rid of, but it's one of those things you just got to let go, because he doesn't have, his shoulder's just been kind of beat up, so he does what he can. whatever. It's just good rowing, and I think watching good rowing is always something you want to do. Boom.
There you go.
Nice.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm going to stand really close to Brian, not because we're really, really close, but because he's got the microphone that's working, and it's on him. So I'd like to, this is our next speaker. This is Brian Stevens. Brian went to school here, played
Lacrosse.
That sport. He played lacrosse, and then he ended up working with our trainers. And we have I'd say, out of the park, especially in Division III, trainers. Our fitness trainers are amazing. Our head one, Johnny, has presented here several years. So we have Johnny and Ty and Brian. And Brian works with us. He's going to talk about working with our program in rowing and fitness. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
18 minutes, buddy. Fire it up. Here we go.
All right, so as I was introduced, we'll be doing training kind of on the water and off the water. So when you're on the boat and then off the boat. Pictures, we have the 2012 team. I'm not sure where it was. And then something I really like, the weight room. That obviously is not our weight room. That's Oregon. So we all can't be that lucky. All right, but getting started. So the easiest way to plan your whole year is to just set it out, look at it. You're going to look at it from a whole year point of view, like I said. So what you're going to do is, put in your events, competitions. If you have athletes, if you're in high school that, are multi-sport athletes, you're obviously not going to be able to train them, allocate time for them during that period. And from that, you're going to look for that last event that they're competing in. And from there, that's going to give you the basis to build, a proper workout program for them and regimen it the right way. So going from there will be the periodization. And there's 3 different ways you can look at it when you're looking at that whole training program as a whole, not just as bits and pieces. And that's going to be the macro cycle. And that's kind of your year at a glance. You have each month, like I said, if you have athletes that are playing different sports, kind of cut out their chunk of time for that. You're putting in, holidays, competitions, events, when you'd like a rest cycle in there, like in between Christmas and New Year's. It's not really practical to try to train anyone because no one's really motivated to go, or you're going to see family. Then you have your mesocycle, which is a nice kind of broad spectrum definition. It can be anywhere from a couple weeks to 12 weeks long, or, half a month to 3 months. And that we'll get to a little bit more in depth down the line. And with the microcycle, that's just your day-to-day, what workout they're doing for that day, whether it be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So off of that kind of mesocycle, that's where you get more of the specialized training. And you have 3 of those to choose from. You want to do them in sequential order. But it's stabilization, and that's kind of important because if you're getting, at least, for when I came here, I was a lacrosse player, so, I've been doing that. I've wrestled, played football, played lacrosse in high school. So I've been around the training for that. A lot of times when you have athletes that are coming to college, that are freshmen, they've never rowed before, but they'd like to do something that's active, So from there, you kind of have to take your athletes and figure out where they are in a physical fitness level. A lot of times, you could have a stud athlete, but then you're going to have someone that has never played a sport in their life, and they just, rowing looks appealing to them. They're interested. So from there, you have a lot to work with. So stabilization is important because what you're doing more or less is building like a solid base. There's that old saying, house is only as strong as its foundation, and it's as true to building an athlete as it is to building a house. Next would be the strength phase, and that's kind of a culmination of 3 smaller categories where you're building your muscular endurance. Hypertrophy is a muscle building phase, and then your max strength, which is going to be, obviously, as the name implies. And the final progression is the power phase, and that's where you're kind of culminating everything that they did for those past 4 cycles. So then breaking down those cycles a little more. So like I said, stabilization, that's where it's a lot of hands-on coaching with your athletes. You're building a strong core. Correcting muscle imbalances, that's kind of goes to if things aren't firing properly, you're just getting them used to being on the boat, pulling, working on the erg, getting the correct form. And also stabilizing joints, as you had mentioned earlier about the shoulder. That's one thing where if you're fortunate enough to have a strength conditioning coach, you get that past history of an athlete and you kind of work around the injuries you realize if he has a shoulder problem, you kind of work on trying to stabilize and build up that shoulder, all the little muscles in there. So and the progression through that is just kind of, you go from controlled unbalanced, so you'd be like a 2-foot, balanced situation, then you go to 2-foot unbalanced, 1 foot unbalanced, and then, 1 foot balanced, and then 1 foot unbalanced. And that would be doing, squats, single leg squats, lunges, things like that. For the muscular endurance phase, your athletes are just getting used to lifting weights again and actually having weight, on the bar, using dumbbells. And the rep ranges are a little high, but it's lighter weight. You're not trying to max them out right off the bat. And that's 3 to 4 sets for 10 to 15 reps, depending on what muscle groups you're using and things like that. And also for this, it's about, a 4-week cycle where you'd be working on increasing it. And if you need a little bit more time, you can always add a week or two. Then with the hypertrophy phase, as I said before, you're building off the strength gained with the endurance, but you're also building the muscle up. And the importance for that is the fact that the next stage for max strength, you need to have bigger muscles to help generate more force. And it's a whole bunch, if you look at, I guess it would be work for you guys, is ropes. You have your small ropes that have a tensile strength of 50 pounds, and they'll break. The thicker ropes, the bigger the diameter, the more force they can withstand and hold and pull. Same is to be said with muscles. So with that hypertrophy phase, it's going to be 3 to 5 sets of 8 to 15 reps. And the reason I put the asterisk there is you're not trying to build bodybuilders. That's kind of counterintuitive to what you need on the boat. You need strong, efficient rowers. So the 15 rep range is a little high because, again, you're not trying to build a linebacker in a boat. And after that, hypertrophy phase, which can be anywhere from a month to 2 months, you're then going to proceed to the max strength phase. And that's where the weight and the intensity drastically increase. So you're looking at doing anywhere from 75 to 90% of their 1 rep max for exercises. And that's going to be anywhere from 3 to 4 sets for 1 to 8 reps. And then for power, which is kind of, as I said before, the culmination of everything, is you're putting that all together. So it's going to be that same heavy weight, but you're moving it over a short period of time, and that would be with things such as cleans, clean pulls, things of that nature. And with that, you're still going to have the 3 to 5 set range, but the reps obviously drop drastically with that. And the reason I'm telling you that is to pair it up with what, for the spring, the ladies are doing, or gals. No. Which one is which? Where is the mouse? Okay, so there we go. So this is from Coach Davenport for us for the cardiovascular training that the females will be doing during their spring phase. February and March depends on the weather, whether you'll be out on the water or not, and that kind of will determine whether they're on the ergs, biking, or actually out on the water. But as you can see, it's probably for us as a strength conditioning coach is one of the best things we've gotten from a head coach because it gives us what he's actually thinking about and where he wants the girls to be, which we can coincide with the strength phases that I showed you earlier. February and March are going to be a grind. It's going to be a lot of high volume, low intensity exercise to get that cardiovascular base set and ready to go. I don't really understand stroke rate that much. That's something you all probably do more than I do. But the training frame with the cardiovascular, the C4, C5, and then the various quantities. Oh, sorry. Can everyone see that? A little better now? No? So we go from there And you're a strength coach a lot. There's that one, and then, yeah, just open the next one up. Oh boy. Okay. So then this is a breakdown of those different categories that we had on that previous slide that would be up. It just goes over your cardiovascular levels and how hard the pieces are. Again, I'm not adept with the sprint piece or the split pieces, the one piece duration, things of that nature. But it has the cardiovascular max levels there of your VO2 max. And pretty much the C1 is going to be your your sprint work where you're working the hardest for the shortest amount of time. And it goes down. So C2 would be probably about 100, like 95 to 100% of your max. A little longer piece than the C1 would be. C2, again, is going to drop down some more and be a little bit longer spaced out when you work your way all the way down to the C6. And that's going to be kind of your low and slow, long bro.
We'll email that out to anybody that wants it. So if you're looking at it and can't grab it, or no worries, we'll get it to you if you'd like it.
Okay. Yeah, it could get big. Yeah. All right, and then, got to exit again though. That brings us to what we're doing with the ladies, or I should say gals, this spring. And for our current phase that we're in, we'll send that out in the link as well, but it's their phase for January 20th to February 10th, and it's a hypertrophy phase for them. And one of the things are the rep ranges, as you can see. There we go, perfect. Is with their sumo deadlift, squat, or deadlift, it is going to be a 3-set for the first couple weeks, increasing the reps. And that third and fourth week, we're going to increase the range again through another set. And it's kind of one thing you get to do as a strength coach is with the hypertrophy phase, there's a lot of different things you can do. This is one of the ones where you kind of build up the pyramid. Another phase you can do is kind of undulation, where you'll go like a 8-10, 8-10, or like a wave pattern as well. So there's a lot of different variables you can throw into the mix to help train your athletes. And if you do have a strength coach available, I would highly recommend kind of picking his brain to help coincide what you're doing on the boat with what you're doing in the water, or sorry, what you're doing in the weight room with what you're doing on the water. Let me go back to the slide. And I showed you all that to bring up this next point, which is pairing the two properly together. So if you do have a strength coach, if that's available for you, it's definitely one thing to go sit down and get on the same page as them. So when I described your stabilization and the other phases, you want to pair those up coinciding with those different C1 through C6. So when you're in a stabilization phase, you'd like to use a C6 where it's a long, steady state. You're just working on getting that form, getting that athletic, or I shouldn't say athletic, that cardiovascular base laid. It's the same as when you're pairing the stabilization. So you're getting the body used to being stabilized, moving in planes of motion for rowers, which would be in a seated polling position. And in those strength phases, you're going to pair with where you're slowly increasing that work rate that you're doing on the boat. So it'd be from a C5 to the probably C3 range. So you're increasing it, and it is easiest to do that because, as I just said earlier, in February, we're putting them through a hypertrophy phase, and then Coach Davenport also has them on a lower, slower training program, which means they're going to be on the erg for a while. And a way to pair the two is we're putting the gals through a circuit workout with all their exercises as opposed to have them go through the lift and then have to do more cardio on top of that. So it helps kind of negate that extra cardio that would be needed because you're lifting the weights as opposed to just doing it by itself and only getting the muscular benefits out of it. In conclusion, the best thing to do is to plan through the year. You don't want to look at that microcycle where you're playing day to day or week to week. Sit down with the calendar, put it all out in front of you, spread it out, figure it out from there, and then you can slowly break things down where that stabilization phase is going to be a month long. You have your 3 strength phases that, can be anywhere from that muscular endurance, which is going to be a month, to hypertrophy that can be anywhere from a month to 2 months, and that max strength phase that will be a month long. And finally finish with that power phase, which is going to give you anywhere from about 5 to 6 months of training, depending on what your seasons are like. And the biggest thing is just ask other coaches. It's kind of one of those things. If you have strength coaches available, just pick their brain. They're there to help. The easiest thing is when he's right next door to just stop in, ask us questions, see what we're thinking, and also see what he's thinking. So we're on the same page. You kind of limit the risk of overtraining your athletes, which would be detrimental to them. And then from there, if you don't have, a strength coach, it's not really a huge issue. Just, reach out. There's a lot of blogging out there with strength coaches. It's kind of the way being a strength coach is going now. It's not so much getting degrees. It's going out there, trying the exercises, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. So just kind of do your own research, but also just ask questions too. So that's it.
Let me be a little more, or let me add to what Brian was talking about. I'll stand close again. Will, you got it? Okay. So this is how we work together. He and Johnny and Ty are 3 trainers. They know a lot more about physical fitness and training than I do. Certified trainers. They go really in detail. The stuff that I learned when I began is either found to be archaic or wrong or harmful, a lot of it, and they know a lot more. So what I do is say, this is what I would like. This is kind of, and again, we'll send those out by email. This is kind of what I would like. We would like to be at this rating at this time, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, okay, I turn it over to them. Help me, not necessarily as Dan was talking about with the 5 1500s or the 3 1500s. Like, we're going to be off the water the whole month of February. So what do I do? It's pretty realistic, again, going with Dan saying, to say, we're going to sit in a room and do 5 1500-meter pieces every single day. How many kids are you going to have on your team by the end of the first week, right? It drops off pretty quick. So this is where it's been really instrumental, and Brian's been great, and the other trainers.
Well, then,
So
that being
really
said,
important.
too, our office collectively, we've never rode, so we don't, we can't translate the knowledge as well. But when he sends us, documents like that, it really kind of, for us, paints a clearer image of what we need to do with that, the athletes themselves. So.
But one thing you guys have done is come out to practice and watch.
Yeah, which
Involved in
that's been the biggest thing, is that since we didn't really know the sport that well, is just sitting and watching the mechanics of what the rowers are doing in the boat, which helps pair for us like that database of workouts we have in our head with what will coincide with what the athletes are doing in the boat. And one thing for me in particular, I compete and do Olympic weightlifting, and a couple of the exercises we do are a lot of lower back intensive, which for me I've been doing, and then looking at the first day when I went out to practice actually with John, it's kind of one of those aha moments when I realized that same motion that I do, where I'm horizontal with or parallel with the ground, is the same as what you're doing in the boat. That final extension, getting that little arch. So.
And if you have the opportunity to take a trainer to church, do it. The church being a 2,000-meter piece. Just saying, hey, hop on here and try it. Our trainer, Johnny Jenkins, did it. What did he get? 717. First time really ever on the earth. He got off and said, never doing that damn thing again. So, and he's mean as a snake, too, so that's pretty interesting. Okay, well, Brian's coming up to lunch.
Yep.
Right? So he'll be around to ask questions and such. So thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it. Good job, man. Okay. If the countdown starts. How's that? Are we live? All right. Okay, next speaker, Nikki Stimson. Should I put the Williams in there? No.
No, it's gone.
Okay, it's gone. So, by the way, I forgot to tell you on Brian, his name there is tough. That one word. Thanks, Brian. So for Mickey, I'm putting a hyphen in that one word for Mickey is devilishly sweet. So I happen to have the pleasure of coaching Nikki while she was here. She was a rower and a swimmer. Senior year, she was captain of both teams. And Nikki's a very sweet person. Oh, yeah. No, There's that devil side to her. As a matter of fact, we went out one day. She flipped a pair, right? A pair partner. Her and her pair partner came in and got so mad at me, sat on the erg, and got one of our top 5 erg scores on a 5K. So it's like, oh, yeah, she's definitely. And she went from here, went to Wesleyan, 2 years at Wesleyan.
Yeah.
At Navy for 11 years, so she was assistant coach at Navy, and she was the coach of the year, assistant coach of the year how many times? Three times, assistant coach of the year in Division I. That's pretty special. And Nikki's going to talk about, well, what's neat about Nikki is that she's gone from Naval Academy, now she's at Gunston. She's gone from college to high school coaching. And she has this really special perspective on how we can help our athletes with that transition of where they're going from high school to college, because she's seen both ends of that. Right?
Yeah,
Did I do
definitely.
Okay?
Yeah,
You
that's
gonna
great.
hit me?
No.
No? Okay, Nikki Stimson.
Right. Thank you. I just want to thank Mike for welcoming me back again. This is my 4th time speaking here at Rowing Talks, and every time he calls me up, I'm like, Mike, it's Nikki you're calling. You sure you want me to come back? So I'm, again, always thankful for this. As Mike mentioned, I spent 11 years coaching at the Naval Academy, and then about a year and a half ago, I made the transition to coaching at the Gunston School. I'm their admissions and athletics associate, and then I'm also the director of rowing programs there. And I think this picture kind of helps to start the story. And this was from last May when there was a ceremony at the Navy Boathouse, and my team was invited to come, and they got to meet a lot of the women that I coached at the academy. And when we were there and kind of afterwards, the kids at Gunston were like, why did you leave? You know, what were you, that place is a palace, and it is a palace, and it was amazing, and it was an amazing chapter of my life. But I'm also, married. I've got 2 young boys, ages 8 and 6, and I wanted to kind of have a more balanced life. And, after being an assistant coach for 13 years as well, I was ready to, I felt I'd outgrown my position. I was ready to move on and start my own thing, but, we got the husband, got the kids, he's got a very successful soccer coaching business. He wasn't in the position to move, and that's what we would have had to do if I wanted to be a head coach at the college level. So I started kind of looking around, and in the summer of 2012, a good friend of mine said, why don't you check out Gunston? And I was like, where's that? She's like, it's on the Eastern Shore. I was like, okay, having gone to Washington College, familiar with the Eastern Shore. So that summer I go over and I meet with the athletic director, Anita Gruss, and immediately just was smitten with her right off the bat. She's like my cool aunt, my cool sporty aunt that we sit around and talk about sports all day. And it's like, professional development every day with me and Anita. And then after sitting in her office, we go down to the waterfront at Gunston, because at Gunston, it's the campus sits right on the banks of the Corsica River. So she takes me down and she shows me this. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I think that's what really opened my eyes. And this program is very young. It was established in 2006. And when I saw that waterfront, I was like, oh my gosh, I would really love to be here. And so over the course of that year, I pestered Anita, finally got my foot in the door for an interview. And then by the end of that year, I was offered the position to transfer over to Gunston. So as you can see, this big dock here we call that the Molly dock. That's for our sailors. And that's also the finish line of our 1,500-meter race course. So that would go down this way. And then up the screen is heading towards the Centerville Wharf. And there's a great little, probably 1,000-meter stretch in there that I can get little pieces in. And nobody is out there. And we get waked maybe once or twice a week. And the kids are like, what's going on? I'm like, you guys have no idea, how awesome this is. There's no other schools out there. It's just us. So, to see that opportunity, see this young program, I was kind of all over that. And so I started in the fall of 2013. And it was about kind of just creating a culture and getting the kids used to me. And as soon as I got there, I really made it a point. I'm not here to talk about Navy. I'm not going to be that guy, because that's weird, right? It's like starting a new relationship and talking about your ex-boyfriend all the time, well, Navy, we did this. So I was really careful that first fall not to talk about Navy too much and really, really focus on them and just creating that culture. And then that's in the springtime out in the Corsica there after one of our inter-squad races. So I saw this as a clean slate. How do we create this culture? And one of those is consistency. And I think, as I've learned with coaching high school students, is they crave consistency. They will never admit it, but they like structure, they like consistency, they like to know what's expected of them. And one of the things that we started last spring was we do dynamic stretches every day before practice. So classes end at 2:07, and then at 2:20, that's when sports begin. Sports are from 2:20 to 4:20, and then the buses leave right at 4:30 because we're a day school. So right at 2:20, the kids get together. For those of you who have been to Gunston, like my friends from the Freedom Rowers, we're kind of on this little cliff, and then you go down these steps down to the banks of the river there, which freaks people out sometimes when I forget to mention that when they come to race us. I'm like, oh, did I mention those steps? Sorry about that. So right at 2:20, the kids begin their dynamic stretches. I'm at the base of the cliff, kind of talking to my coxswains. Sometimes I even just start sweeping the boathouse because it's nice. They do their own thing, and they take ownership of that, and I think that's one of the great things that we've implemented with the dynamic stretching routine. And then as soon as they're done with their dynamic stretches, they come racing down the hill, and they kind of all gather in front of me and my novice coach, and I ask them every single day, and this is something that I've taken from Mike Hughes, is I say, who wants to get faster today? And they'll raise their hand. And then who wants to be a Maryland state champion? And they all raise their other hand. And I think that's so important, and it's something that we did with the midshipmen, and those they still do that today at Navy. But I think it's so important to constantly remind young athletes like these guys why they're there every day, because I think they can get caught up in, oh, I've got homework, I've got this, I got that, and it's like, you're here now. You're on the team's time. You're not on my time. You're on the team time. You're here for your teammates, and you need to remind yourself of why you come to practice every single day. And then the other great thing that I taught them was just how to look after our equipment. Just every single day, they're like a pit crew. They come off the water, they rack the boats, they're spraying down the boats, they're wiping out the tracks, and it's just been really neat to see how malleable high school athletes are and how coachable they are and how they really can get on board with doing that. Accountability is another big thing that we really focus on at Gunston. As I mentioned, my husband's a soccer coach, and he helps coach the Severna Park High School soccer team, and they won the state championship in 2013. So, he's my husband, I live with him, so it's like, well, what do you guys do? And he mentioned the hold the rope strategy. And I don't know if you guys has anyone heard of the hold the rope metaphor? So hold the rope is, imagine that you're dangling from the end of a rope over the edge of a cliff, and you want to envision one of your teammates holding the other end of that rope. And, that's just a metaphor for practice every day, for, hard pieces, being there for your teammate. And so every single season, before the fall season, before the spring season, I always sit down with them and I remind them, and we do the hold the rope scenario. And then I got a little crafty, which I'm not very crafty at all. But I got a rope, put it on a plaque, and hung it up in our boathouse. And every day when they go out, they hit that rope as they're heading out to practice every day. And again, it's just constantly reminding them of why they're there. And then we aim high. One other thing that I stole from Mike Hughes is our covenant. Every season we sit down and we talk about our goals, because if they don't know what's expected of them, I think again they kind of lose track of why we're there. So it's like, well, do you guys want to get top 10 at the head races this season? Academics is a big part of that as well. And then I have them all sign that covenant, and then we hang that in what we call the cliff house, and that's where we house all of our rowing machines. So I think all those little things help as well. And as coaches, we're always looking kind of 5 years, 10 years ahead, where would we love to see our program. But the thing about Gunston right now is I'm really just enjoying the journey and just the day-to-day, and the kids have just been so amazing, and we're kind of in the thick of winter training right now, but just their motivation has just been tremendous. And, they feed off of that, and then I come up with ideas, and it's just been a good balance and just been a lot of fun. So next slide. So speaking of winter training, that's just another slide of our boys kind of on that little 1,000-meter stretch last spring. And I think winter training is kind of, as Mike mentioned, this is our time to start to talk about rowing in college, because this is probably one of the tougher times, that year when it's boring. It's very boring, and you want to keep them motivated through it. And as Mike mentioned last night, only 6% of high school athletes are going on to row in college. So how do we, as high school coaches, kind of spice things up, keep things interesting throughout the winter training? And I also want to minimize injuries as much as possible. I think that's a big thing. I just remember being at Navy and always running again, into kids that, I've had my knees done, I've had MRIs and blah, blah, blah. It's like we, as high school coaches, I think that's part of our responsibility to really try to limit injuries as much as possible, and not just train hard, but train smart, and just be really careful and understand what their bodies are capable of. And so one of the words we use a lot, and it's a word that I learned from Mike when I was here as an athlete. We were sitting over in the athletic center having a meeting, and you probably don't remember this because I don't remember half the stories people tell me now. So, but Mike was asking us, well, why do you guys row? And I said, because it's fun. And Mike's like, you just can't say fun. It's too arbitrary. He's like, you can say it's engaging. And I said, okay, great, it's engaging. And for some reason, that word has really stuck with me. And now every time, so I said that to the kids at Gunston. I said, a lot of the workouts that we do, it's not fun, but I do want them to be engaging. And so a lot of times now I'll ask them, how was the workout? And they're like, it was engaging. And I'm like, all right, well, you can't use my word. So, but again, it's we do a blend, and Linda kind of touched on this last night. I have 8 ergs, and right now in winter training, I have 24 athletes. So 3, 2, 1, go do the math, and that really forces me to be creative, and I enjoy that though. I have fun being creative with that. So we do a lot of body circuits, and I just try to come up with workouts maybe where they're working together in teams, anything to make it competitive, again, but engaging at the same time. So that's kind of like what we're known for on campus. And the teams really blossomed. There were 25 athletes that first fall. Then by last spring, I had 33. And then this past fall, I had 42 athletes come out for the team. And enrollment at Gunston is 164 students. So that was pretty incredible to have that many kids out. And just a testament to what the athletes were doing as well. It was just kind of a great combination of the two. We'll go to the next one. Oh, they were great. Yeah, they were. So this is my team in the fall, and as I mentioned, now we're in winter training. We're talking about 2,000-meter pieces. And I'm mentoring a lot of my upper class students on, rowing in college. Some of them have asked me. And one of those students is here with us today. Jules Ships is in the audience, and she's a freshman here at Washington College. Jules was my women's captain last year. And I think she's kind of one of the reasons why I'm here today. I think, because her success here at Washington College. I cannot take not all of the credit, maybe a fraction of the credit for Jules, because I only had her for 1 year. But I kind of picked Jules's brain, and I was like, what did we do, that helped you prepare for Washington College? And, Jules said I was brutally honest, and that's about college rowing and about, what it's like to row in college, especially at the different levels, Division I. It's up to 20 hours a week. It's like a part-time job. But then you do have the Division II, Division III, and the club option. So there's kind of, everyone thinks, college rowing scholarships, but there's so many different facets of college rowing out there that it doesn't have to be as overwhelming. And so, I think talking to Jules about that, and I am brutally honest about that with them in general. I'll tell them, hey, I was kind of disappointed with that workout, but let's work things through, and let's talk about it as opposed to just yelling at them all the time. And I think they respond well to that. And I try to keep up, lines of communication with them quite a bit. I think just doing that. And kind of going back to the college level, as a recruiter, I was the head recruiter at Navy. It's really tough because you're getting a lot of kids showing interest, and you really kind of have to start weeding people out by numbers, and that's kind of the ERG score, height and weight, GPA, and SAT, ACT, and it's tough. It's really, really tough especially at the higher levels, because that's probably the number one questions a lot of college coaches are going to ask you, or your athletes, what's your 2K erg score? And, Mike and I were talking about, like, what are those magic numbers, and I think for men on the Division I side, it's like 630 or faster. For women, it's 730 or faster. But at the same time, I think there's so many colleges out there, so many different college coaches that they're looking for different things as well. And I don't think it hurts to ask. And that's kind of what the message I wanted to send today is. I think kids get very intimidated, reaching out to college coaches. Even my athletes are kind of funny. They're like, well, could you email him? And I'm like, no, you need to email the coach. You need to tell them that you're interested. And I think there's just a lot of people are looking for different things. And I think, the erg score gets you the interview. And then once you come to campus and you meet the coaches and the team, then it's more up to the personality and how things and the chemistry of the situation and how things blend from there. So, I help my guys write sample emails. I'll walk them through the process and just try to answer as many questions as they can, because it is interesting coming from, that one world, the college world, and now to high school, how scary it is, how scary that process is, and how intimidating it is to reach out to college coaches. And I try to tell them over and over and over how approachable college coaches are. Even though while I said that, I'm a total hypocrite, because I've been in the presence of some pretty amazing college coaches and I've acted like a total nerd. So it is possible to do that. So don't stop asking. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to say no. So. There's Jules rowing in the varsity 4 last year. And then finally, this is the view from my boathouse. And yes, I'm showing off again. And so what I've learned over the course of this year and a half is that teenagers know everything. And, once you've established that, then we're all going to get along fine. That's just a joke, because they don't know everything, but they think they do. And don't try to impress them. I think that was the big thing. Like, I don't try to be cool, because I'm not. I know I'm not cool. And I think if you just be yourself, you'll eventually earn their trust. And it took a while my first fall at Gunston to really get the kids to row the style that I wanted. We started preseason in mid-August, and then by October was when things really started to come along. So it just takes some time, and they really just have to get to know you and earn your trust that way. And so that's pretty good. Usually I'm pretty short. That's it. So usually I'm like, I'm done. So I usually try to sell my unused minutes to the other speakers, but
What about
never mind.
What about questions for Nikki? As a college coach, I value your opinion immensely. We call up or we email, say, tell me about changes. Tell me about blog. We really want to know. Do you guys have any questions for Nikki? Because she's been that person that would be calling you up.
Do you have much engagement with the parents?
I do, yeah, very much so. And I think they're the ones that are also kind of nervous and unsure. And so I definitely see it as not just mentoring the student, but I also mentor the parent as well. Absolutely, yeah.
How do you do that?
They'll have the same questions, like, well, a lot of parents ask if the parent should email coaches, and I really try to steer them away from that. When I would hear from parents when I was coaching at Navy, that would make me skeptical. Like, well, is your kid really interested in coming here, or are you really interested in your kid coming here? So I always try to push the parents to push the kids to contact the coaches directly. And I'll give them sample emails. For coach, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So anything to kind of help them along with the process, and I'll call the coaches as well. But I really like to see the kids make that initial step.
I'm talking about during the year since they're high school.
Oh, okay. I think once you get the kid involved, then because a lot of times when I would meet with recruits, obviously they're going to be with their parent, and sometimes you would separate the two. Maybe you'd have a one-on-one meeting with the athlete, and then you'd bring the parent in and share as much information and take the time with them and answer questions as well. And that really seemed to, they showed a lot of appreciation when we did that. So, does that make sense? Yeah.
We've got time for one more.
Okay.
Which tool do you find to be most useful on other websites? I know that you have an hour event. Which
So what tool was most useful when I was recruiting? A lot of times, and I was in a very kind of interesting situation because being at Navy, I would usually wait for kids to come to me, but, Crash Bees is a great tool, seeing placements at SRAAs. But again, like a lot of times kids would just, if a woman showed interest in coming to the academy, I was like, woohoo! Because I would go to the college fairs. I would stand at the booth and I just all by myself, and like all these boys would come up and I'd be like, hi, yes, okay. Where are the girls? And that was really tough. So, over time, we would get more and more inquiries, and so that would I hope that helps. Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay. Nikki, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah. Okay, turn that.
Boston can do this together. You're inflated, unlike the footballs in Boston. Okay. All right. I'm a Pat fan. I can say that. So. All right. So, John, here's my one word for John: weird. And here's why I say that, because when I first ran into John, I thought, here's this guy, and he's doing what with foot stretchers? And I just looked at it like, weird. I don't mean a bad way, like weird, like sketchy behind, he's hanging out behind stores drinking things out of paper bags, but weird like, well, that's really weird. And over, 2-3 years that we've known each other, he's become a friend, but also somebody whose opinion I really, really value. Last night we did a session, and part of it we talked about the foot stretchers. We have an org outside that you can pop on and try the Shimano foot stretchers, and this isn't I'm not pushing them or selling them by any means, but over the time frame, we've had a lot of conversations about what makes a boat go fast, and are those pieces of equipment, do they have relevance, and do they make a boat go fast? In my opinion, in our world, I won't say take this home and you can say this is relevant to your world, but in our world, yeah, they make a boat faster. But you're weird, and you're on. Okay,
sounds good.
15 minutes. Very good.
So the comfort zone, I'm not going to hard sell you guys in this room. Maybe at lunch or outside I'll put the hard sell on. But today I want to talk to you about the comfort zone and how you get there, how you can create this culture of comfort with your athletes, with yourself, with your program, with your athletes. So this is your dream come true, right? You want to have your team on the podium with the hardware around their neck. This process, though, what you see here today, really looks like this. And I'm sure if you talk with Dan or with Linda, they're going to be able to confirm this to some degree. But that national team starts out with over 300 athletes around the country. They select it down to maybe 25 or 30 at a camp. And then finally, those 8 girls or 9 girls that were wearing hardware are selected from 25 or 30. So this is a process that, unfortunately, most of you in this room don't have those luxuries. So this is what your process looks like. You have 25 or 30 goofball kids standing out front of a boathouse, and you're trying to get them onto a podium with the same amount of hardware, right? So it's a different scenario. And when it's a different scenario, you have to think about changing your culture, changing your process, and getting these kids comfortable and making that 25 or 30 goofballs into 9 gold medal wearers. And you can't do it the same way necessarily that Dan or that Linda or that Volpenheim, the way that they handle their process. You have to understand where you are and how you're going about doing it. So what's the difference between the national team and what you guys are working with? Well, you probably have a bunch of ex-basketball players, ex-swimmers. I heard some people in this room here. Nikki was a swimmer and a rower, right? So she probably was wearing both hats at some point. You're trying to recruit some of those kids. You're looking at the kid standing out in front of the gym and saying, you know what? He's 6'2". I could probably put him in 4-seat, right? That's the way, but they don't know how to row, and that's the difference. You know, Volpenheim and the national team, they're taking Linda's people, they're taking Dan's people, and they're already conditioned to have a comfort in that sport. You have to build the sport and do it with your eyes. Do it with your skill set. You don't have to necessarily look at erg scores to determine who's going to move the boat the best. The national team's able to do that. They need a benchmark. You guys have 25 kids. You got to find the best 8. You got to find the best lineup that's going to move that boat. And it may not be the best erg score. It may be the best kid that has the best personality, that's the best motivator. It might be the kid that sets the boat the best way. Use your eyes. Use your skill sets to determine who is that kid. You got to create that ability, personality, dedication, the comfort zone. You have to create it. The comfort zone exists at the highest level. It already exists. It has grown organically over the past 10 years. These athletes have been rowing in the highest level for 10 or 12 years. They don't need to worry about comfort. They have it. And then finally, your resources. What are your resources? And we'll get that on the next slide. But what you need to remember is that at the highest elite level, the resources come to the coaches. I'm knocking on Linda's door. I'm knocking on Dan's door at least once a year. I'm calling Mike anyway, but I was knocking on his door. I don't know where Gunston is. I don't. I don't know where it is. I don't know where probably 90% of your programs are. So that's the difference. You actually have to pick up the phone sometimes and call guys like me, call guys like Greg, because we want to help you. We want to get our equipment into your program, but we don't know where you are. And it's just the way it goes. So please, you know what your resources are, and the difference is you might have to reach out to us for the first contact versus us knocking on your door. And that's just the way it goes. Oh boy. Now I know it's tricky trigger, isn't it? So the resources, who are they? Some of these are guaranteed that you already know. Boat builders, obviously. Equipment suppliers, Shimano, Croker. Coaching education, you're in this room right now, so you've already taken that step. Rigging education, Mike's the expert, buy the book. Your team and you. So I'm going to get into industry research in a second, but your team and you, use the skill sets that some of your athletes have. They may have connections at other programs. They're friends. Hey, my friend's coach does this. My sister goes to this school and their coach does that. Utilize those athletes to some degree. Maybe not to the fullest degree, but to some degree. And industry research. So later this afternoon, you're going to hear from UberSense. There's the Boston shout out, right? And also, I do my own research, and I found a company called Catapult. And this may be a little bit out of the pricing structure of what we all work with. But Catapult's a company that uses micro technology that's wearable, and it can allow coaches and teams to identify exactly what the performance level is specific to that athlete. So Florida State University uses it for their football team. They invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this equipment. But it's able to take like a 230-pound athlete and a 175-pound athlete. They wear this device, and it can show all the metrics about what is appropriate training for those specific athletes. So I use that as an example, and it's probably at the highest end or the furthest degree, but there's a lot of things that are available to you, whether it's through NK, apps, a lot of technology that's out there, but you have to go find those resources and find that industry research and find tools that are going to help you and in your price range. So, got ahead of myself there for a second. So, into the comfort zone. This is what it's all about. And it all starts with the mental comfort, I believe. So I coach wrestling, and I coach at the youth level. And it's a really mentally demanding sport, regardless of age. So at the end of every practice, I make sure that we play a game, whether it's dodgeball or something fun that's not necessarily wrestling related. It's physical, but not wrestling related. So that when those athletes leave practice, and I'm telling them to come back tomorrow or the following night, the last thing they remember is a fun game of dodgeball. They don't remember me drilling for an hour and a half prior. They remember dodgeball. So I'm trying to bring the mental stress of the sport down a little bit in the practice environment. But are your athletes happy? Are they happy when they come to practice? If they're not, are you asking the right questions? Is there something wrong at home? Is there something wrong with their peers? Is there something wrong at school? Did they have a bad lunch? Did they have a stomachache? Are they happy? Is rowing their happy place? Because these kids are going to, the 6% or whatever it is that actually go to college, you want that 6% to finish college as a rower. And I've talked to some coaches at the high-end college level, and I've asked very specific questions about, hey, how come you're not recruiting from this geographical area? And I'm not going to get into specifics, because if I did, you probably wouldn't know where I was talking about. But those coaches will say, I don't recruit necessarily, or I don't aggressively recruit from that geographical area of the country, because it's such a high-performance high school rowing area. And what happens is those kids get to be juniors, and they're done. They're spent, and they're not spent physically. They're still 18 years old. They're spent mentally, right? So know what it's all about, the mental comfort. Are these kids happy being there? Are they physically comfortable? One thing last night, we were talking about the comfort. I think Mike said to one of his athletes, what do you like about these oars, the particular oars that they use? And one of the girls said, I like the way that they're comfortable in my hands. I have small hands, and they're comfortable in my hands. And I don't want to embarrass him, but one of the coaches raised his hand and said, or her hand, and said, well, some of us still like wooden oars. Well, yeah, some of you in this room may still like wooden oars because you were rowing with wooden oars, right? But what are your kids like? You're not rowing down the race course. They are. So find out what makes them comfortable, not what makes you comfortable or what makes you feel good about it because it's what you remember. But ask them. You know, I think in this conference last year, Larry Gluckman said, it's as simple as clothing. What are they wearing? Do you look at them and say, you know what, it's 25 degrees out. Why are you wearing a T-shirt? Are they comfortable in the clothes they're wearing? Larry said, make sure that your kids are training in the clothes that they race in. Because if they're comfortable in those clothes training, they're going to be comfortable on race day. So it's that simple. I mean, clothing, right? But some of these kids are 15. My boys don't wear shoes outside sometimes. You got to remind them, hey, do you know you put shoes on? So, physical comfort, clothing. Are they being taught how to stretch properly? Are they taught how to warm up properly? These are all the things that you may take for granted because they were former basketball players or former swimmers. Well, they must know. They don't. Teach them how to stretch. Teach them how to stretch the right way. Teach them how to warm up. You don't want to get out on the boat cold, and I don't mean cold, temperature cold. I mean your body can't be cold. You should be going out there with your first stroke with a little bead of sweat coming down your face, and that's what I teach my wrestlers. You don't go out there to start that match without a little bead of sweat coming down your face. Is the team comfortable with each other? Is the peer support and understanding there? That's important. And I'll give you a scenario there. Is that 2 weeks ago I was in Florida with a college team, a women's college team, and I recognized that there was a lot of younger girls, like just noticeably younger, at the training session. And I said to the coach, I said, what's the ratio of freshmen that you bring on this training? And she said, we usually bring 6 to 8 freshmen on all of our winning training camps. They're typically at the higher end. They've had high school experience. They're not necessarily walk-ons. But we have earmarked them that they'll probably be in a varsity boat next year. We bring them to this training so that they're comfortable with the juniors or the seniors. So that if I do have to make a lineup change mid-spring and I put a freshman into that varsity boat, she's comfortable with those seniors. She knows who they are already. She trained with them. And it also helps promote leadership. It's a succession plan for leadership. Those freshmen get to see how the seniors are leading the team when they're freshmen so they can become the next leaders. So peer understanding and support is important. And this is the team expectations. This is what you have to set. Does your rowers know what their role is? And that's important. It's not what their role is necessarily in the boat. Like they may say, oh, I'm 5-seat, I'm stroke seat. Well, if you change that, if you take a kid that's stroking your varsity and you put him or her in 2-seat for whatever reason, you determine that's what you need in your lineup, do they understand why you made that change? Because if they don't understand it, they may think they got a demotion. And then it goes back to mental. Now they're not mentally comfortable anymore. So are you setting the right expectations for your team, and do they know what their role is? Because this is important to kind of reduce that prima donna athlete, the kid that somehow miraculously pulled a 6'10". You know, he's in high school, he pulled a 6'10", I'm the best. Well, I'm going to show you a video here that's one of my favorite movies, and it shows you how to build a process, or it talks about how to build a process to eliminate that prima donna type scenario. So it's from one of my favorite movies, Moneyball. Oh boy. Tricky. You get a volume on this, Mike? Lauren, you should be pausing that. All right, that's all right. That's why I put subtitles in there, right? So that's cool. We'll hit play. Basically, I'll just give you the scenario. Watch this on your own time, right? He says, Billy Bean, general manager, baseball player. He says to him, Billy, you recruited me to steal bases. I steal bases. I'm fast. He says, no, I pay you to get on first, not get thrown out at second, right? He wants players to do their job. He thinks because he's fast, because he runs a quick, 440 or something like that. He says, I'm your base runner. I steal bases. No. You get thrown out at second. So make sure your athletes know what their role is and what your expectations are for that. So make sure I'm on the right slide. Back to comfort, right? So the comfort is what we have here is that we've recognized now that you guys have 15 to 20 athletes, all shapes and sizes, short, tall, skinny, fat, male, female, right? You need to make a lineup. And how do you do that? And what most coaches will tell you at the highest level is that you need to make them longer. You need to make that stroke longer. Well, getting the stroke longer means that you have to force the most uncomfortable position, which is the catch, right? So I'm going to give you a quick story here. I know I got 3 minutes, but I'm going to steal a couple more because of the AV technology there. This scenario here, this is the head of the Charles team, L. Logan stroking the boat. Rest of the boat uses Shimano. You can they're noticeably shorter. We put Shimano in that boat to get all 7 rowers from 7 through bow longer and more comfortable because they needed to keep that same reach that L. Logan was having there. So you guys have the same scenario. You have a mixed lineup of sizes and shapes. You need to get them longer. How are you going to do it? With keeping them comfortable. Because if you make them uncomfortable, right, if you make them uncomfortable, then it all goes back to then they're mentally uncomfortable, they're physically uncomfortable, their peers don't like them anymore. Couple tips here. John Keogh, Canadian national team. Reduce the chance of injury. You guys can read that. But he wants them comfortable and safe. He wants to make sure that they don't get hurt, but be comfortable. Korzanowski, same thing. Make them long in the water. So the foot stretcher position is crucial for gaining that length. You need to be able to pivot, and you guys will be able to talk to me later today about the features and benefits of Shimano, but it allows you to pivot at the front end, get more reach, and stay more comfortable. So here, we'll be able to see a video of that product in motion, hopefully. It was there before. So finally, we'll skip that one. I don't know what's going on there. Hopefully this video shows up. You know what, Mike? If I can get back to the library screen, I can probably just click on it independently. It should pop up, yeah. Either one. I got 2 videos there that are under the black. Yeah, well, the next one down to the video. So look, see that little star to the left of it? Click on that and see what happens. I do want to show you this in the last 30 seconds of this video, so I want to try to find it. I think I have it there if we get it in the... That's disappointing. What this video was is the Polish national team, and it's the women's double, and these girls were, if you were to poll everyone in Amsterdam this year, they would say that the Polish national team double were the underdogs by a lot. And it wasn't because of strength or ability. I mean, they're some of the best rowers in the world. It's because of their height. They were substantially shorter than the other 10 girls in that field of the A final. Substantially shorter. It's another L. Logan, 7 through bow scenario. But through the video, you'll hear the announcer say, look at that little Polish double coming from behind. And what you'll notice, and we can get this to you guys, or you'll see it on a live feed later on, what you'll notice is that their stroke rate was 3 beats lower, but they're driving through the water the same way that the Lithuanian double was and the Kiwi double. And they actually started to overtake them, and they ended up in second overall. But it was showing you a good video of how these short athletes were able to get length through the water and then maintain the drive and maintain the power and the speed with a lower stroke rate. So I'll leave you guys with that. I'm out of time, but thanks for all your patience, and thanks for your attention. That's all right, man.
You ever seen how? Have you guys ever seen how wrestlers shake hands before they? Where's John? Did you leave? Come here. We gotta do this. We gotta do this this way. So my son's best friend's a wrestler. I've never been to a wrestling meet. I've seen Chief Jay Strongbow on TV wrestle. That's a whole different world, right? So I go to the wrestling meet. All right, and they come out and shake hands, and they come out like this, and then they go down like this. And I started laughing. I started cracking up. I'm the only one in the whole audience, about 200 people laughing. And I'm looking, all of a sudden, everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, oh, gosh. Tracy goes, you better leave now. Somebody's going to hit you again. Johnny was a wrestler. We did that the other day when we saw each other. So I digress. I apologize. Okay. I'm going to give you one word for Linda. She's going to be mad at me. I've used it before. She's one of my heroes. To me, a hero is somebody who you look at, and this is my viewpoint, you go, wow. And we had, I don't know if anybody was here when we had Oksana Master and Rob Jones up here. Without a doubt, Rob Jones is a hero to me. You know, a Marine, lost his leg, fighting for our country. And then crazy enough, not only to row, but ride his bike across country in winter. I don't know if anybody followed that. I kept saying, Rob, what the heck are you doing? It's winter. He's out there wiping out and sliding all over the place. Oh, this is fun. But this is about Linda. To me, Linda's a hero. She's had a heck of a journey. She's been with us before, and I asked Linda to come down to tell you about her journey because, to me, it's a very inspirational one. I'm not going to tip anything here, but it's also one that I love to hear, and she's just a cool person. You're cool, too. But Linda's one of my heroes. So. Can I give you a hug before you go?
Thank you. Okay, we're on. All right, how many Ravens fans? See, this is much better than last time I was here. The room was littered with them, and I'm a Patriots fan, so I don't have to ask all of the Ravens fans to leave today, which is good. So Mike asked me to talk, and it's sort of like an unlikely path from being a rocket scientist to becoming a lifelong rowing coach. And when I was thinking about a title for it, I was thinking, after I was thinking about what I was going to say, it was more about sort of no rate cap, trying to have no limitations on what you can do and what you can try for. I didn't start rowing until I was in college at MIT, and I was actually an engineer, which is, if you're an engineer, you know that's not the same thing as a scientist, but my teams always really like to say that I'm a rocket scientist, and a lot of my friends do as well. Some of them think that I'm what the best one was astrological engineering. I really like that one a lot. I'm an aerospace engineer, or I was. Anyway, when I got to MIT, the path that got me there was not one of a sports career. I'd been involved in athletics for quite a bit of my youth, but not to the same extent or level that most young women have the opportunity to these days. This was, pre-Title IX time, and when I was in elementary school, 72 was when Title IX was signed, but it didn't really go into effect until the early 80s when I was in college. And my parents were extremely supportive. Looking back, it's hard to imagine how lucky I was. Last night, Mike talked about being an early adopter of technology and equipment, and I think I was sort of laughing, the shiny new object, and he's going after whatever it might be, whether it's the shoes or the oars or something. And I laughed a little bit, and then I realized I'm sort of that with like new activities and events, and I always wanted to try things, but I had a lot of support from home to do that. And maybe it's because of how I was brought up. I was signed up to do brownies, and off I went and did the little Girl Scout thing. The first sport that I did was bowling. My parents signed me up for bowling. I didn't sign myself up for it, but in third grade, I found myself on a Saturday morning bowling league, which I did right through the end of high school. So I did 9 years of bowling, and that was my first competitive foray into sports. But there were other things that anytime I wanted to try, they really seemed to support it. I wanted to do some gardening so I could take some vegetables to the local fairs. And my dad was happy to plow up a little patch of the backyard. In hindsight, I realized he hated mowing the lawn, so he didn't mind that. But when my sister and I started playing basketball, he put up a net and a hoop in the backyard. Again, took up a little bit of grass space. So there was always that. But if I wanted to take a cooking class at the community college, they're like, sure, do that. Somebody came into the school and they're like, we're looking to get kids interested in the orchestra. How many of you want to play the violin? I'm like, I'll do it. It really pretty much didn't matter. Oh, they're asking for tryouts for the chorus. Sure, I'll go. I'll try out. I'll do that. So I just felt like I was supported so much, and a lot of that came from my parents, but it can also come from the coaches that all of you are in helping the young people you're working with. So something shiny, something new, that I was definitely all about that. But getting back to the path that got me to MIT, I didn't have the opportunity to do competitive sports until I was in high school. And junior high, I got to try out for the boys basketball team, because that's what you were allowed to do if you're a girl, because there wasn't a girls basketball team, which wasn't great. But again, sure, go ahead, try it, do it. I didn't make the team. I got to high school, and there were definitely teams, for equal number of teams for the boys and for the girls. And the boys in the fall had football, cross country, and soccer. So they had 3 sports. And the girls had 3 sports. You could play field hockey, you could be a cheerleader for the football team, or you could be a cheerleader for the soccer team. I have not seen soccer cheerleaders anywhere else to this day. In the winter, again, the boys had opportunities. They could play basketball, they could do indoor track, or they could wrestle. And as girls, you could play basketball, you could be a cheerleader for the boys basketball team, or you could be a cheerleader for the wrestling team. That's one that I don't know if there's ever any wrestlers here had wrestling cheerleaders. So I went to school with girls who cheered for the wrestlers, which was a little bit odd. So anyway, those were the opportunities. So fortunately, that's not the way it is now. It turns out I was a pretty good field hockey player, and I was being recruited at a couple of schools to play, but my parents were like, no way, are you going to college, and it's going to be centered around sports. So fortunately, I had other interests, and again, because I just was always like wanting to do things, I'm like, well, I really like to be an astronaut. I was kind of a nerdly science fiction fan growing up, and I thought that would be really cool. And so if I wasn't going to get to play field hockey in college, thought that, well, I'll at least try to be an astronaut. I went to MIT. That was the plan. I played sports there. I played field hockey my freshman year. We didn't have the same kind of out of season Division III training then that schools do now. So it could be a lot like high school, where I played field hockey in the fall, I played basketball in the winter, and I ran on the track and field club team in the spring. So that was great. But it wasn't, remember the shiny objects, something new? During the fall of my freshman year, there's an event called Class Day, and with the people who already rode on the team, it turns out it was sort of an on-campus recruiting kind of event, but you had to have 6 people in the 8 who rode already, and they'd bring in 2 new people to lure them into the sport. And so they're like, okay, Linda, you're playing field hockey, we'll get you, and got somebody else. And we were in the tanks one day, and maybe in the ergs, and then we did this 500-meter race, which I was telling Mike's team yesterday, I can't even remember what happened. But I thought it was great. It was a lot of fun. So I went to one of the all calls for the rowing team, and it was in the morning, and I went down, and we're out in this barge, and we're out there sort of rowing, and I don't really know what I'm doing. Nobody knows what they're doing, but you don't think about that at the time. And there's this coach, this woman walking up and down the barge, and she's yelling at people and telling what they're doing. I'm like, forget this. So that was that. I went back, didn't go back to rowing until the next fall. Same event comes around. They're like, let's do this again. I'm thinking, yeah, that was sort of fun. At this point, my roommate's boyfriend was rowing, our house tutor was rowing, and they were both training, doing national team things. And so I thought, this rowing thing might not be too bad. So I went and did that little Class Day event. And again, I can't even remember. Who knows what happened? But I felt like it was fun, and it seemed to be more of a challenge than what I was doing with some of the other sports. And again, I didn't think it was going to be something huge in my life, but it was a lot of fun. Cut to the chase. I got into rowing. I never looked back. I started rowing in the winter of my sophomore year, so I had 2 days on the water before we started indoor training. But it seemed to work out okay. When I finished college, before I finished college, I did get invited to a development camp as a lightweight rower. I wasn't really mature enough to make the most of that, and didn't have great success with that in terms of rowing. But after I graduated from college and working as a boat builder for a while, I got back into rowing, made a big push. It took a number of years for me to kind of learn how to work hard enough to be effective and to be a competitive rower. But there were definitely some stumbling blocks along the way. I had one coach tell me, you'll never be able to learn how to scull. And I was thinking, well, being a sculler would probably be better for me. There wasn't lightweight rowing in the Olympics at the time. Not one of the hugest women on the planet, certainly not by rowing standards, and had some success sculling. But, you'll never be able to learn how to scull. And I actually went up to Craftsbury way back, before Dan was there. Dan would have been coaching at Princeton probably at that point. And learned how to scull, and again took a number of years to become proficient. Did pretty well nationally, and went to some camps, and again had another coach who was actually in charge of coaching me, who said, it's just not going to happen, Linda. You just stop. But I never paid attention to that. Just kept sort of pushing through, and wound up with being in the right place, being sort of an unlikely success story in the world of rowing. I started much later than a lot of people. I was 28 before I made my first national team, and I was 37 when I was on my last national team. Wound up rowing for the U.S. for 9 years, and won 3 world championships, which was really, really very special. And I think some of it came from having that support and trying the new things and going through all that. But while I was doing it, I was taking in a lot about the different coaches that I had, and I also knew that I wasn't really keen to go back to engineering. I'd done some teaching and got involved in working in the classroom a little bit, so I went back to graduate school while I was still rowing to become a teacher. And I thought that would be really, really kind of a great thing to do. And while I was still training, there was an opportunity to coach at Cornell, Dan was actually the director of rowing at the time. My husband was going to business school, and the school year had started, or 2 weeks into the school year, and they're still looking for a freshman lightweight coach. And for whatever reason, I was able to hoodwink Todd Kennett that I would be able to do this and train at the same time, and he hired me. It was probably because he was just tired of running every single practice the whole time, but it was really great. And in those first few weeks, I realized this is what I want to do. This is better than teaching. I found the thing that I wanted to do that I would become a coach. And working there and getting to work with Dan and some of the other coaches that I'd had along the way, I was able to develop a little bit of, who role models were and who some anti-models were, as it were. Because I'd had some coaches that maybe weren't the most supportive or doing the greatest things for my career, but I learned a lot. Todd was one of the most honest people I've ever met, and certainly the same thing with Dan, and he has just a remarkable eye for coaching and being able to motivate the team and picking these things up. And I was fortunate enough to be coached by Jan Harville and Lori Dauphiny in the summers when I was racing, and again to learn things from them and how they treated athletes and how they worked with me. Again, and then I was moved on. I was able to coach at Harvard for the last 13 years, and what was really special about that was, again, who I was going to get to work with. And I got to work with Harry Parker and with Charlie Butt, and again, to keep learning things from them was really pretty amazing. I didn't expect that Harry would be such a role model for me until 10 months ago I was diagnosed with breast cancer, but 2 months ago I made it into the survivors category. Sorry. And part of me, I hate to lose. I'm very competitive, and a lot of that I didn't really realize until I was racing. I just thought everybody was like that, and probably most of the people in this room are. It's little things like you're driving the car, you don't want to let somebody get past you, or but how do you know? You don't know what other people are feeling, and the competitive part of me, sure, I like to win races. I like for my team to win races. I certainly wanted to be able to beat cancer. That was being competitive, but a lot of being competitive is the process, is how you get there, and exposing yourself to risks, whether it's the fourth grader going up to the music teacher and having to sing in front of the whole classroom to try out for the select choir, or to keep getting out in the single when you've been beaten, or when you're coaching, if your team isn't doing as well as you like in the win-loss column, what is winning? It's how you get there. It's the process that you take, and just being able to beat cancer didn't mean because I was super competitive was not what got me through, but a lot of it was having the support of people that I've worked with, and the community, and how I've treated them and how they treated me. And so if we can just keep doing that and working with each other and supporting each other in our community makes the biggest difference. And I think that's what helped me. And there's certainly people. Stuart Scott, the ESPN reporter who died of cancer, died on my birthday just a couple weeks ago, and he was someone who talked about it's the process. You don't. If you have cancer and you die from it, you didn't lose the battle. It's how you're living that does that. And so whether it's cancer or a race or a job or your family, whatever it is, it's how you live and how you're treating people that puts the outcome in the win column. I have a little bit more time, and I can't give it back to John to see his video, but that's really all I have to say. But thank you very much.
Yeah, there you go.
So one of the first times I met Linda is I was with we were racing up in Montreal, and it was the lightweights were up there. It was the World Championship for non-Olympic teams, and I was the boatman for the U.S. team. Linda was up there with the lightweight team.
The lightweights
Right.
there was the lightweight team and the junior
Juniors.
team, and I was a spare for the lightweight team.
Right. So part of that non-Olympic thing is you try to give the athletes, it's the same year as the Olympics, you try to give the athletes a much a feel of that international competition at the highest level that you could possibly get. And at that time, lightweights weren't in the Olympics yet. So the U.S. team got together, and the decision was, and I think that had been going on for years, to have an opening ceremony. In the opening ceremonies, there would be a flag bearer come out, and the flag bearer, carry the flag, or bearer, right? And so we're all sitting in a big room like this, and the guys and the gals are in there, and somebody says, well, who do we pick? And, people are saying, yeah, Bob wants, and so I forget who it was. I won't mention a guy's name, but he comes up. He was one of the, so it was going to be a show of hands. So I love this story. I'm sorry. I hope it doesn't embarrass you. But, so whoever it was, Bob comes up, and people are clapping, and he thought, oh, that'd be cool. He took his shirt off, and he flexed, right? Like, oh, guy thing, So, okay, this is before me a hand, by the way. And he went back down. All the guys are like, yeah. Well, Linda's one of the choices. So Linda comes up. She's standing up there, and it's kind of, okay, yeah. She takes her shirt off. She has a sports bra, of course. Takes her shirt off and flexes. The room's just like, whoa! Yay, Linda! So Linda was our flag bearer.
I had a lot of support from the junior women's team.
The junior men's team. Oh, the junior men's team were like, oh my God. They were like, so.
Yes, it's true.
Okay, all right. Well, Linda will be joining us for lunch, and a great time to sit and talk. So 4 more minutes, and then we'll have our next speaker come up. This will be the last one before lunch, and then we'll transition over there. Have a couple minutes. Anybody questions before lunch? And then we'll just motor on up, and we'll go through that.
Bye, Willie.
Okay, folks, here we go.
Yucky stuff.
It's my pleasure, I'm going to stand next to Deb. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Deb Davis. Do you want me to tell a history real quick, or were you going to mention that as part of your...
What history?
What history, right. That's a tough question. Deb's a rower, rowed at Trinity College.
St. Andrews.
And St. Andrews, sorry, in Trinity. Has been rowing for years and years, is now is director of...
The emergency department?
Right over here at the hospital. Here's my one word for Deb, and I'll tell you why. It's yes. Because I had a bout, troublesome, ended up in the hospital, ended up in the ER, and I was pretty groggy, and I opened my eyes, and there was Deb, and I was like, yes. I felt really comfortable having done. I don't know if you remember, but I remember. This is one of those things that you always remember. The other person looks at it, I don't remember that story, but I do. I do. So Deb's going to talk about...
Blisters.
Right. All yours.
All right, thank you. I'm going to tilt this just a tad so I can see. So this is some yucky stuff right before lunch. So I work at Shore Medical Center over here at Chestertown. We've had like 3 name changes in the last 10 years and are now affiliated with the university. So we're a small wheel in a great big system, and we really have lost some of our personal touch, unfortunately. But we try to do a really good job over there. Like Mike said, I've taken care of some rowers, some coaches, and it's a pleasure to be here in Chestertown. I've grown up here, lived here all my life. So that little thing there with the 33 is my boss. This is the head of the Charles, and she doesn't take any business, and people get out of her way. So we'll move on. Mike said no bullets, so these aren't bullets. These are goals or objectives. The bullets are for Mike. So we're going to talk about what causes blisters, how do you prevent blisters, how do you treat blisters, when do you worry, and how do you prevent complications. So how did this happen? Blisters are caused by friction, and what happens is the layers of the skin become sliding on each other. The body sends in a bunch of cells and a bunch of fluid to help protect the area and to help it heal, and that's what makes a blister. You can get it from overuse, from changing different oar handles, and from too tight of a grip. Whoops, this thing does go fast. Whoa! Okay, so this guy thinks he's got hands of a champion, or maybe he just was gripping the oar too hard. So grip is important. Obviously, you all know that. You don't want to have a death grip on the oar, or they're going to be more likely to develop blisters. This is from overuse. This is a guy that rode transatlantically. And as you can see, just having wet trowel, being in the saddle the whole time, is going to be much more likely to get blisters. So when you start out, you don't want to go out for a 30-mile row your first day. You want to start easy, give the kids a chance to develop calluses and have more solid hands rather than developing the blisters. Oars. Greg wishes these were all croakers, but they're not. This is at the head of the hooch. And changing oar handles. I row for a composite crew. We rent equipment. I may have a skinny one day and a croaker another day and a sculling oar another day. And I find that just switching different handles, different widths, different sizes, it's going to hit maybe where my blisters or my calluses are not. So then you're more likely to develop more blisters. All right, how do we prevent blisters? Just what we mentioned already. You want to be careful with too much volume too soon, trying to keep the same type of oar. Whoops. Gosh, this thing is really touchy, sorry. There's some things out there, blister balm, over-the-counter stuff. There's no science with this, but if your athletes want to try it, it may be helpful. Witch hazel, alcohol, surgical spirits tend to help dry the hands out. Some people advocate putting this on the hand will dry it out a little bit, help toughen the hands up a little bit before you get into your season. You can get some cracking with this. And again, I don't think there's any science behind this. This is all just anecdotal stories. Surgical spirits. I think the thing on the left's a porno movie, so Just ignore that. But it's a little suspicious. All right? Anyway, surgical spirits is just kind of an anesthetic drying agent. And then there's these, over-the-counter gimmick things. These are kind of some sort of glove or taping mechanism that people have tried in the past. There's things like new skin. And then, you could always wear gloves. I'm not sure, I just can't do gloves. So, but some of your athletes, if they have particularly tender hands or other medical issues, they may find gloves would be helpful for them. All right, how do you treat the blisters? So, to pop or not to pop? I'm a popper. I've rode a lot. I usually just bite the blister. It's not the best way to do it. Really, you should do this sterilely. Put a little betadine on the hand, let it dry, take a sterile needle, and just put a small hole in the side of the blister and let the fluid come out, and then leave the blister covered with the skin that was already there. And then you need to obviously put a dressing on it and protect it from, wearing away. Whoops, golly day, this thing is up. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of taping techniques out there. I think, people try to just put a bandage over where the calluses or the blisters are and wrap it around the hand. That doesn't work. You really need to do something like a knuckle Band-Aid, which is what's up there, and that will kind of go around the finger. This is some sport tape, which is a very stretchy, clingy tape, and the idea is you want to get it to be anchored at the top around the finger and then often around the wrist so that stuff doesn't roll and come off. The tea bags, some people advocate using them on the blisters at home. It's kind of an anesthetic, will help heal the blister a little bit, so that's always an option as well. I wouldn't put them on your eyes when you're rowing. It just doesn't work. Okay, so here's a sample of the taping technique. Anchor it around the finger, have it come down, and then anchor it around the hand. And that will help keep it stable so that it doesn't slide and bundle up. Okay, so this is back to the buttock blisters. You can always air dry them if you need to. So. All right, infectious complications. This is what you need to worry about. You do have packets in your handout. There's some CDC, Center for Disease Control references, some links. There's also a packet from the Zalac Junior team out in Mission Bay in San Diego who did have an outbreak of some infectious issues and how they kind of put this packet together for their athletes. So probably every week in the emergency department I'll see somebody that comes in and says they have a spider bite. And I say, did you see the spider bite you? Well, no, but I know it's a spider bite. Well, spider bites are very, very rare, and they're very specific look to them. And, the bad ones are the brown recluse spiders, and the rest of them you don't really care about. So the issue is that most of these people have MRSA, or they have a boil or an abscess that's gotten festered and infected, and it needs to be taken care of. This is what you worry about. MRSA is a staph bacteria, Staphylococcus aureus, that is resistant to methicillin, which is a penicillin. So it used to be something we just saw in the hospital on complicated sick patients. It was a systemic disease. And over the last, 8-10 years or so, there's really been a large community-acquired MRSA outbreak. And, we have it. Most people will not have it. 1 in 3 people will have regular staph on their skin, and probably 2 in 100 will have MRSA. It's transmitted by direct contact from open wound to open wound, sharing a towel, sharing personal equipment, things like that. Okay? So it's widespread on the community level. Most of these are abscesses and need to be drained. That's the major treatment. Holy day. Guess we can just, I think you've got to touch it really lightly. Okay. All right. So This is an abscess that was on the foot. Obviously, it festers up. It's red. It's fluctuant. It's boggy. It's ugly looking. People may or may not have fever associated with it. So the treatment is to drain it. This one has been drained, and there's been a little wick or a little piece of gauze put in there to try to keep it open. Okay? That's another one. And don't you just really want to pop that? It just, I mean, I've got nurses in the ER that really seek out these patients, and they want to run in there. Can I help? Can I help? Can I help? It's very, I don't know. It's fun to pop them. So, but that's a bad abscess. Okay, that's on a shoulder. Contrast that to what we call cellulitis, and that's the little red area with the black mark around it down towards the wrist. Cellulitis is just a general skin infection that anybody could get. It could be from MRSA, it could be from other bacteria. If you see something like that, the athlete needs medical attention. This is something just like the MRSA that needs antibiotics. Okay? They need to be seen. And the red streak growing up the arm is called lymphangitis, and that just means this is getting a little more serious. It may not be something that can just be managed with outpatient antibiotics. It may need to be in the hospital and have IV antibiotics. But needless to say, all of these things need medical attention fairly urgently. Okay, so there's this guy called Andy Holmes. He was an Olympic rower. He rowed with Sir Stephen Redgrave years ago, and at the age of 51, he wanted to make a comeback as a Masters. And he rowed in a 26-mile marathon sculling competition in England. And he got this disease called leptospirosis. And leptospirosis is a bacteria that is in urine of infected animals. It's fairly uncommon in the United States. We only see about 100 to 200 cases a year, but it's the most common animal-borne infectious disease there is. We vaccinate dogs for it. I just had mine vaccinated the other day. So an infected animal, cow, rat, deer, dog, whatever, urinates, it gets in the water stream, and then people that have open wounds or lesions or blisters or drink the contaminated water can get infected. It comes on fairly quickly. It has a tremendous kind of flu-like illness with fever, rash, myalgias, body aches, just miserable. Some of these can go on to a liver and renal failure progression, which is called Wheels disease, and that's what Andy Holmes died of. So he was dead fairly quickly from this disease. So this is the really serious stuff. So you know, it's important that we cover these wounds and take good care of any open wounds, mainly for this. The MRSA can be treated. It's annoying, but it can be treated. This is bad news. It's a bigger deal in temperate climates than around here, though we get pretty temperate in August. But okay, and that's Andy. Okay, so prevention is the key. And this is what you need to do. Go back. Yeah, I can squeeze through real quick if you want.
I just wanted to see that slide again.
Yeah.
And the other one. You guys getting the air treatment. There you go.
All right, the yucky stuff. Back to Andy. Okay, so if somebody does have an open wound, an open blister, a cut, scratch, you know, the way you prevent transmission of MRSA or other diseases is you got to wash your hands a lot. So encourage your athletes to wash their hands before practice, after practice, making sure they're showering, you know, when they get home. Use clean towels. You don't want to use your roommate's towel or the boathouse towel. Clean towels. You can disinfect the equipment with any detergent, antiseptic. There's a whole list on the CDC website of what is effective. Basically, a dilute bleach solution, which is a 10% bleach solution, will work fine. You can use Clorox wipes. You do need to read the label because some of these need to stay on for, a couple of minutes to be effective. You can't just wipe it and then rinse it off with a hose. That's not going to work. So be cognizant of it. Read the label. It'll tell you what it's effective against and how long you need to leave it on there. And that's about the end. That's my husband who's up there in the back row. Took that picture at the Charles. And any questions now that this thing spirals out of control?
Any comments on peroxide?
Peroxide I don't think really is effective against, and it bubbles up and all of that. I think the cheapest way to go is just with a dilute bleach. It has to be a fresh bottle. It can't be something that's just sitting around and sitting around.
I mean, on the, like if the kids at the end of the session have a...
Peroxide, I would just wash with soap and water. Yeah, I think that's just as effective. Yes, Nikki? Yeah, I didn't mention that. It's skin adhesive. It's another name for it, which I'm blanking on, but tough skin or new skin. Yeah, I think that's fine. Once you can pop the blister and then put the new skin over that will help tack down the skin and give it a little layer of support. We use the same thing in the hospital for, suturing or dermabonding wounds. So, anything else? Mm-hmm. I don't know what his portal of entry was. He had rode 26 miles, so I'm sure he had, blisters on his bottom, on his feet, on his hands, and, can come in anywhere. It's just really unfortunate. Yeah.
I had a mother tell me about a son rower who had developed blisters on his tailbone that she said had something to do with something different with inflected hair follicles. Any difference between that treatment and
No, I mean, MRSA is, people have MRSA on their skin. Not everybody, but many people do. And any itis of opening into the skin, whether it's a hair follicle that gets infected, is likely going to be MRSA. If it's a scratch and it gets infected, it's likely to be MRSA. So he probably just had it, and then he gets another little site, and the hair follicle is likely the MRSA. But you develop boils.
Another thought that I had just suspected that tight rowing shorts can cause a problem around the tailbone, pushing everything together. You get folds of the skin.
Yep.
Perhaps.
Long rows, the trowel get wet.
And they don't say anything about it because it's kind of embarrassing. But,
Yep. Erging on the seat sometimes with the way the little bump in the seat. If you're off kilter and you have a long erg, you can get blisters on your bottom. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.